ルフィ。助けて。当たり前だ!
At this very moment, almost everyone forgot that this man is a pirate. And out of all Oda's merit, the most underlooked element is Oda's ability to make pirates, at least some of them, become the good guys. While in a post-One Piece world, that isn't very surprising. Think about that for a moment. Think about any criminal profession and think if any storyteller has made that group feel like the good guys. We all love Martin Scorsese and his movies, but the gangsters there are bad people. No one who has seen Goodfellas will claim Henry Hill is a good person. Even historically, Robin Hood is a special case. John Wick is a unique case amongst hitmen. One Piece would have been like any other series if Luffy and the Straw Hats were the only good pirates. But that isn't the case. Roger, Whitebeard, Shanks, most of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, the giant pirates, the herd pirates, are all good people. We have never seen a series where a profession that's generally seen as evil inducts so many morally righteous characters, and the fact that Eiichiro Oda can convincingly pull this off is all the more impressive. Some of the most legendary pirates of all time are good people: Roger, Whitebeard, Odin, Shanks, Marco, and now Luffy. But how does Oda do this? Well, how does Oda do anything? Because it's not easy. Every relevant character is packed with symbolism. Whether it's from Japanese history, pop culture, Hollywood, music, Japanese folktale, Japanese mythology, Norse mythology, Christian mythology, Hindu mythology, and so on. Oda covers a seemingly impossible area of work. Even when you look at the best of any genre, very few writers covers as many fields of artistry as Oda has covered. One of our favorite YouTubers, Taking101, pointed this out about Kuma. He is based on Ninomiya Santoku, a philosopher from the Edo period of Japan. He saw agriculture as the highest form of humanity because it was the cultivation of resources given by the kami or god. In our last video, we talked about Monkey D. Dragon and how he was like a god of thunder who brought rain to heal lands of tyrants and drive them away with thunder. Kuma is based upon a philosopher who held agriculture at utmost importance. Is it any coincidence that a character symbolizing agriculture is a close friend of a character representing rain and thunder? Rain and agriculture are both life givers and both are tied together in a cycle that ultimately helps humanity. And we can thus decipher so much about these characters where even the side characters seem to have such unending depth. And that was from a sketch of Kuma as a child. See what Oda did with just Kuma? In our last video, we scaled the depth of Dragon. It's unimaginable how deeply the main characters of the story are written, how much symbolism they are packing, and what inspiration and references Oda has drawn. Imagine someone like Usopp or Zoro. All of these characters deserve a video for themselves, and maybe they will. This does not work with any other medium of art. You can't do this in literature where the references are far more subtle. Even if someone does drop references in a novel, it often comes off as cringy and meta. The closest way this has been emulated masterfully in any other format is in the cinema of Quentin Tarantino.
You're like a fucking baboon!
Every Tarantino movie is a love letter to cinema, and movies of that genre, Inglourious Basterds is a war film about war films. Django Unchained is a spaghetti western about spaghetti westerns. Kill Bill is a martial arts movie about martial arts movies, and so on. Every dialogue is full of references and Easter eggs. And Oda isn't the only one. Hirohiko Araki, the author of JoJo no Kimio no Boken, famously known as JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, does this as well. Araki name drops fashion designers, songs, and bands that he loves for stans. What is it about these references? And do references even make a story better? If I just cramp a story full of Easter eggs, does that make a story good? Does it add anything introspective of value to the story? Yes and no. References, like anything in a story are mediums and tools at your disposal, just as any feature in a story. A story may or may not have any references, and it may have many. What matters is if the tools used add anything of value or if they are relevant. For example, backstories are a staple in fiction, and like references, they are a tool. Almost every story we know puts some sort of a backstory for a character. That journey in their past molds their character and propels them to the place they are at the start of the story. It forms a certain perception with which the character sees the world and a certain perception with which we see them. For example, before the start of the film, John Wick had a wife and lived a peaceful life. Therefore, a common line of thought is almost everything he does is to preserve some semblance of that peace. Batman's parents died in front of him, and that's why he chose to not anyone suffer the same fate. But these backstories, as we mentioned before, are just tools. It's not necessary that a character must have a backstory to propel them towards a certain action. For example, Frodo in Lord of the Rings doesn't have a very notable backstory. He simply lived a normal life in the Shire. Nothing in Frodo's life propelled him emotionally against Sauron. He doesn't have a personal vendetta against Sauron. He could barely comprehend the scale of Sauron's evil in the beginning. But in Harry Potter, Harry has a personal grudge against Voldemort. In the Modern Warfare series of Call of Duty, other than a sliver of look into Captain Price's past, Soap, Ghost, Roach and others do not have a backstory in the game. Though they have extensions of lore granted in other mediums such as comics, the reasons why we didn't take an extensive look into their background is because it wouldn't be relevant to the story. We do not need to know the backstory of Soap because the main theme of Modern Warfare is the destructive nature of war, which affects everyone irrespective of their background. Hence, an extensive backstory is not needed. Similarly, for Lord of the Rings, Frodo doesn't have to understand Sauron or have a personal grudge against him, as one of the key philosophies of Lord of the Rings is that anyone can fight against evil. Even someone as seemingly ordinary as Frodo, and it's often very ordinary people who possess great strength to bring down evil. This is what Oda does as well with references. And backstories, we will get to that eventually. The references make the story better. If Zoro wants to be the greatest swordsman who has ever lived, then it makes sense that he embodies the Bushido principles, livelihood of a samurai, and is some sort of references to Musashi Miyamoto. In One Piece, the references aren't just passing. They are useful and necessary. The references set up character dynamics, such as in the case of Kuma. The fact that Luffy draws parallel to Hanuman and son Wukong enriches the story that pulls a great amount of focus on ethnic and indigenous culture and the risk of that beauty being destroyed under tyranny. Shanks being Tyr is not just a one-off parallel or any allegory. It adds flavor in a story full of Eastern and Western cultures and adds bits of Norse and Scandinavian myth and a necessary plot in the form of Elbaf and the Giants. We need to know the backstory of Sanji to understand why he acts a certain way. Similarly, we don't necessarily need Luffy to have a backstory as tragic as Robin, as Luffy is a different character from her. Luffy's tragedy, like Frodo or Soap, is happening in the story. The tragedy isn't in the past, it is in the present. Character with a notable backstory functions differently from a character without a backstory. For example, let's take Nico Robin. Ohara was destroyed by the tyrannical overlords, the 5 L-Stars. Robin's limited trust in humans and her ability to believe in herself was further reduced to nothing. Thus, the tragedy leads to a certain type of characterization. It can be both positive and negative. For Robin's case, it was a negative one, as she didn't trust anyone after the tragedy of Ohara and the death of her closest friends and family. For Sanji, it was a positive one, as he vowed to never hit women and didn't shy away from finding a new family and better friends. The characterization established with a backstory is then challenged by the events of the story. For example, Sanji is put in situations where he has to hit women, or Nico Robin is put in a situation where she has to trust others to live up to the trust of others. Now, this isn't unique to One Piece. Batman's parents die and he forms an outlook that is then challenged. His parents were murdered, so he will never murder, and then he has put in situations where he has to kill someone to save others. What is unique to One Piece, however, is how exclusively Oda balances both the backstories and the ones without one. Chopper, Robin, Law, Sanji, Nami, Frankie and Brook have a tragic backstory, but Usopp, Luffy and Zoro don't. And the latter three are some of our favorite characters ever. The tragedy for them happens in the present and is far more enticing than their past. Delving a bit deeper, it's somewhat like a battle between Freud and Jung. Luffy is the Jungian hero, so is Batman or Edward Elric. We have always found it interesting that the hero's parents always die in the beginning. Is that just a cliche? Or perhaps it's the necessary destruction of a safe place so that the hero can go out into the world and face it. In some ways, it's the necessary destruction of the Oedipal mother. The safe place keeps the hero from becoming what they can. Thus, not only does the death of parents provide the hero with some emotional push and start a character arc, symbolically, it's the sign of the death of the Oedipal mother that is limiting the chances of mistaking the mother for the mistress, that is to not go for the safe place when challenged and instead face the challenge head on. The anima is of course what they have to live of and face, that is their destiny and not the motherly comfort they started from. Now, not everyone immediately betters themselves to face the world. They perhaps starts believing that the tragedy is what they deserve and this is who they are. Hence the cowering behind an Oedipal mother. What they should be doing at the face of tragedy is facing the tyranny of the world head on instead of being safe behind a parent. And this safe place, though represented by a parent, can work for characters who are orphaned. It's about feeling safe in a certain view of the world and not challenging it or confronting ideas or situations that challenge it. Nico Robin believes she's a burden and doesn't deserve friends, and she often goes out of her way to keep that negative belief safe. Characters will come up with all sorts of ways to not confront the world and change their views that's affecting themselves negatively. Robin and Nami betray their own friends and Usopp leaves the crew. This is not limited to the main cast, as Gecko Moria is the epitome of that idea. Hiding behind a safe place. As Luffy himself said, as long as I am alive, there's infinite chances. Luffy not only fights for others but gives them an ideal to die for. Nico Robin's entrapment in her internal pandemonium isn't just solved by Luffy rescuing her, but her realizing that there are those who will fight for her to the death and that she is worthy of love and friendship. Nami is rescued when she stops taking all the burden of a village unto herself and allows the villagers to take up arms against Arlong as well. Luffy not only frees Nami but also frees every citizen of a village. Paradoxically, it's pushing people into danger with encouragement and love, of course, that makes them better. And that is the entire story, isn't it? Going out into the world and confronting challenges and tyrants to prove better, to get out of the comfortable island and run into the seas of East Blue to live the East Blue and face the larger Grand Line and then venture into the far more unpredictable new world. Oda's genius gets even more enticing when you realize it's not just about conquest and proving yourself better, as that can easily lead to a sort of selfish arrogance. Luffy will not fight when provoked or for a selfish reason, and Luffy does not understand the totality of the cause. He just follows better examples such as Shanks and Garp. The ultimate goal of the conquest is to be strong enough or to be competent enough so that you can create a better world for everyone and not power for power's sake or freedom for freedom's sake. It's that Oda understands the complete ends of the philosophy, and through Luffy or Shanks, we are shown the right approach in achieving it. And Luffy, Zoro and Usopp don't need that tragic backstories, as the aforementioned issues and merits can be found in anyone. Usopp doesn't have a backstory as tragic as Robin, yet he's the most negative, and that's because poor mental health can afflict anyone regardless of what they are going through in life. Usopp has his moments in the present, such as his transformation into Sogeking, Alabasta and saving the Tontatas. Similarly, Zoro has his character developing moments in the present, the nothing happened moment, his moments in Wano, or standing up for his crewmates and pushing them to stand up for themselves. Luffy's tragedy is in Sabaody and in Ace's death, and so on. In fact, Luffy is unique in this sense that in the beginning of the story, he isn't an underdog. He doesn't get a challenging fight until he faces Crocodile. Before Crocodile, he pretty much ran through all of his enemies. In fact, in the arc of East Blue, Skypiea, Thriller Bark, Punk Hazard and Dressrosa, Luffy wasn't the underdog, at least in terms of fighting the main villain. Sure, there were challenges, but the Straw Hats weren't always absolutely at a disadvantage. While almost every story starts with the characters lagging behind and slowly catching up, Luffy starts the story handsomely and is ahead of many of his enemies. Luffy's challenge isn't getting stronger, it's being strong enough to protect others, and especially the ones he cares about. Thus, when it comes to faring better against an opponent, Luffy does fairly well. The real challenge comes from him being unsure if he is truly strong enough to protect others. Thus, Luffy is at a disadvantage and an underdog in those scenarios. All of his losses and near defeats come from a villain who chooses not to primarily go after Luffy but someone he cares for. Robin, Vivi, his entire crew at Sabaody, and Ace. If Oda wanted, he could have had Luffy face Kaido right after Dressrosa, but he waited for the Straw Hats get close to Momonosuke, Law, and the Scabbards so that Luffy and the crew have a reason to go out and fight, and so that the audience understand that it's not just about Luffy beating Kaido, but that beating Kaido frees up years of operation that these people and their country has been facing. And he did the same with Vivi, taking Whiskey Peak, Little Garden, and Drum Island to build Vivi up as a character worth saving. And while these characters such as Vivi and Momonosuke grow on us, the Straw Hats have their steady growth over a long period. Hence, the length of One Piece is not only fitting but also necessary. Like fine wine, the characters and the world get better with time, and the growth is felt in real time. While there are some writers who are devoted into creating something entirely new that can arguably never be replicated, Oda takes a very different and very ironic way. New approach. What really gives Oda the edge is the medium he's working in comics. Oda makes the best of that medium, scrambling in touches and tiny references to various things he loves. He can make a character look like a pop culture or a cinema icon. He can paint out cities and areas he likes in the story. He can make a shop, a dress, the label of a food item be a reference, and all that saves the story. He can make us tear up over humans and ships alike. Oda capsizes the story effectively within its medium, and he does it peerlessly. While there are others like Hiromu Arakawa, Hirohiko Araki, who might do it as well as him, if not better, no one does it over such a long period and at such a level of grandiosity and scale as Oda. And it would be interesting and a fortune to see how the future of One Piece unfolds.